cover the quality of the work.
Correct.
Okay.
Then the third question is the sealant noted on the estimate intended for the tile layer, or is it for repairing and sealing the exposed concrete plaster layer?
Cover the quality of the work.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Did you have Heather, was that you?
No, I think it was the recording,
Okay.
kicking back. So go
My
ahead.
apologies. Hopefully it stopped. I think we're now live on YouTube. Everything's a little late this morning.
Okay. So the sealant is the expansion joint material. It doesn't have to do with a product applied on top of the exposed cement plaster.
Okay.
So we recommend masons for that job because it's something that they do on a much more regular basis. They install a lot of sealant, and those joints really do need to be watertight. So from our view, it's straight masonry work rather than specialized conservation work.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jen. That helps a lot. How about anybody else? Any other questions for Jen?
I haven't really had a chance to read the report, so maybe I'll just wait. But so are you thinking that those 2 layers of cement under the tile need to be removed, or are those going to stay intact?
Those, for the most part, are going to stay intact. I took an acrylic hammer and I sounded the tile on about 70% of the globe, 70, 75. And remarkably, most of the tile is still well adhered and is intact. So I don't think that complete removal of the cement plaster is necessary. There are areas where tile has fallen and it is due to issues with the cement plaster. So I am recommending limited intervention in those areas, which would be cutting back the failed material. We would not have to go past that fiberglass membrane.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still no disturbing of the asbestos.
Mm-hmm.
And basically replacing the failed cement plaster with new and putting tiles on top of that.
Mm-hmm. So the general consensus is that the reason it's failing is because we've had moisture essentially getting through the tile joints and debonding it from the cement. Is that kind of generally what we think?
Yes, you've got that moisture. You've got that moisture getting in causes biogrowth. It causes freeze thaw damage over this change of seasons, things like that.
And then there'll be some sort of coating that's going to put on to stop that from happening again?
Well, so typically that's in the grout and the expansion joints. So I think one of the issues is that there's been very minimal maintenance, if any, on the grout for the globe. And as anticipating that going forward, I'm recommending a high performance grout, which won't need a sealer installed on top. It's included in it's integral in the material, which will lower your maintenance requirements moving forward. It'll still have to be cleaned and monitored and repaired as needed, but that's one of the recommendations we made to hopefully give you additional life out of this treatment.
So based on that, what would the life be? Just the life of the grout? So
yes.
Would it be 10 to 20 years or?
The grout and the expansion joints. It really depends on the weather because we're not dealing with we're dealing with a small object that is exposed on all sides 24/7 through all 4 seasons.
Okay.
It's something that just needs to be, it needs an eye kept out on. As long as if you're going to be even just giving it a water rinse to remove biological growth once a year, once every 2 years, if you make some sort of assessment to see, just someone walking around saying if you see bulging tiles, if you see missing grout, if those things are monitored, they can be addressed sooner than when you start to see tile failure.
Okay.
So are you saying then, Jen, that the grout life dictates the life of the globe?
Pretty much.
Okay, so you
because
can't
your
just,
goal is to keep water out, and the main point of
Yeah.
infiltration is going to be those grout joints.
so when this fails again, which will be, inevitable, can we then again just replace all the grouting?
Depending on the point of deterioration where the grout is addressed, yes. Grouting should be part of a semi-regular maintenance process. Not necessarily every year or every 5 years. It really depends on the condition of the grout, but it is, if you routinely address it, yes.
Okay. And one of the things that comes up quite frequently is whether or not pressure washing is okay for artwork, sculptures such as this that are tile
Mhm.
and paint, frankly, too. So,
It really, really depends on the pressure being used, the operator, the distance that they're operating at, the fan tip size, how wide the spray of water is, things like that. Typically, we don't recommend pressure washing over 600 psi under any really circumstances. You start, especially with masonry, you can start to see deterioration at 300 psi. And in this case, I don't, if it's being pressure washed from like a boom lift, and as long as you're maintaining at least a foot between the tip of the wand and the sculpture, and that the grout is in good shape, you should be okay if this isn't, as long as this isn't done like on a monthly basis. If you do it once a year, that would probably be my recommendation. You'd get more life out of the grout if, rather than just pressure washing, you used a biogrowth cleaner like D2 or Persoco's Revive, or even something from Home Depot like Wet and Forget. But if you put it on and then power wash it off, that will help remove some of the traces of biological growth that are basically everywhere, and they start as a biofilm, but then they increase in size up to moss. So if you remove the film, you're not giving the moss something to grow on. So you'll prevent that.
okay. So
So-
that makes total sense, actually, going forward, that's probably something that we need for the city, is to have that in writing, so that the care of this is done correctly and ensures the longest longevity that we can get out of it.
Agree. I think you spoke briefly to that in the report, if I remember correct, but maybe we could, I know we're adding a few other details in terms of the cost and discussion on asbestos, which I can speak to in a few minutes, but yeah, maybe we add some details on these maintenance suggestions.
Sounds good. I just added a note to myself to do that.
Thank you.
Heather, do you want to discuss the asbestos? Because I believe that was originally raised by the city engineers.
Yeah, and maybe Troy could speak to that as well. I know for me, it just kind of raised flags, immediate, that it was found that there was asbestos in there. It's obviously not good. It can have big impacts. I don't know that much about asbestos myself, but I've come to understand a little bit that primarily the hazards are with it being airborne. And I did not realize until just recently that we had known that it was there and then encapsulated it. That was news to me. So that kind of has helped me to calm down, I guess, a little bit in terms of knowing that's there, but it has been taken care of, and it does not appear to be posing a threat of any way, safety or environmental or otherwise, being that it's encapsulated and not compromised. Troy, what would you like to add?
Well, I just want to let the committee know that the two ways of dealing with asbestos are: one is encapsulating it completely so that you don't have any chance of particles becoming airborne, or the other way is abatement, which everyone knows is completely removing it, which takes specialized equipment. You need to have, in this case, the whole entire eco globe would need to be encapsulated on the outside with sort of protective sheeting. They'd have to have special air treatment going in, and air filtration equipment, blowing air in and coming out, along with just a water supply source to be able to remove it. And so whenever we first took a look at this and just saw the extent of damage, we thought, well, obviously this problem may be more extensive than we can actually see. And so that's why we were looking at completely removing all the tile, abating the asbestos, and then going ahead and trying to see how much it would cost to reinstall the tiles on the globe itself. But as Jen pointed out, the fact that she sounded, they did a pretty good job at mapping the loose tiles, the bolting tiles, and indicating that as far as the asbestos is concerned, there really isn't a problem because it is fully encapsulated. Obviously, a little area where they did take samples of the material, we would seal that up, probably with epoxy or something to bring that back out to the same surface and to be able to cover that up, so there's no risk in that little area. But I mean, the area is only maybe a 2 to 3 inch square, roughly speaking. So.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, Jen. I know you have to leave in about a minute, if not already. If you wanted to add something or to the asbestos, or if folks have another question for you, I just wanted to throw that out. We can send more questions after the meeting. Do you have any other thoughts then on the asbestos? I know we talked about it yesterday. It's kind of just out there. I think maybe nothing more to add, I guess, the fact that it's been encapsulated.
It's been encapsulated, and that encapsulation is still in good condition and intact. So the work we've recommended does not create an asbestos risk, and it's not a public hazard. I think you're okay for now.
The other good thing, Jen, is that you did say that a lot of the tile was still well adhered.
Yeah.
And so, the job that you were suggesting is more of a maintenance related job.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So it's a little, for me anyway, it was a huge relief to see that it was what you were saying it was.
And Heather and I talked about that on site. I looked at it and had the same initial thoughts that you guys did, but I spent a couple of hours just walking around with my little acrylic hammer, just trying to justify to myself, are these really intact and sound? Is it really as good as it seems? And yeah, I think it really is. Which is a great sign.
So
anybody have any more questions for Jen before she goes?
If you have a minute. So it kind of sounds like what you're saying is that periodically this thing needs to be thoroughly checked out to see what the condition is, and repair the issues as they arise over time.
Yes.
So that like maybe within 5 years, we might need to be doing a little grouting in some areas. And that could extend this life dramatically, correct?
100%. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Right. Mm-hmm. So if we go forward, then of course we need to somehow have budget for that to happen on a regular basis, seems like, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be my recommendation.
I just wanted to clarify that. So.
All right. I have to head out, but it's been great to meet with you guys. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions.
Thank you, Jen, very much.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, Heather, you want to tell us if Chris is going to be able to come?
I'm here.
Oh, excellent. Thanks, Chris. You have it. You've got the comm.
So just a question, apologies. I was logging into I had 2 meeting appointments for this meeting.
I need to figure that out. My apologies for that. Yeah, that caused confusion.
No problem. So did you approve the consent agenda or just go straight to Jen?
No, we went down through the paperwork stuff. And so we are exactly at B right now.
Okay, so police station.
Before we move ahead, can I just ask a question about the globe? Since she had to get off, I didn't have an opportunity to ask my question. So maybe one of you can answer this. Was she saying that there would be no treatment to the tiles that were deemed sound through the tapping.
Well,
Right.
I go ahead.
Right.
My understanding is that she's saying we need to take a look at all the grout and the expansion joints throughout the entire globe. And from what I understand, her recommendation is to remove the remaining grout and microbial growth, algal growth that's occurred there, and then regrout everything with this high density or the specialized grout, and then put those expansion joints back in there so that, not only can the material have an opportunity to expand, but also everything was protected that way. There is some tiles that do have efflorescence on it. And what that is it's kind of like a calcium substrate that happens with a lot of concrete type structures. What it does is kind of like a calcifying mix of minerals that kind of leaches out, and then some of those tiles have that on it. And so, trying to clean that off to make sure that those tiles are in good shape. Still, that was part of her recommendation. So,
Okay, I just, I think it would be important to clarify what kind of treatment will be conducted on the quote sound areas, and whether that's part of this or not. Because it sounds as though, even though it's structurally sound at this point, some of those tiles, they do need maintenance and treatment in an ongoing fashion, which has not been done in the X number of years the globe's been installed. So if that could be completed as part of this project, that would, I think, be preferred. So just to understand whether that's part of this estimate, that would be helpful.
Yeah, we chatted with her yesterday, and it's my understanding that would be included. There's quite a bit of fees for conservator, was the bulk of the fees on the cost estimate page. And so one of the suggestions that we had made to her was we'd like to see more detail kind of on all of those bid items on what, there's really just kind of a heading that's listed. And so we'd like to see, but that was one of the things I believe she had discussed, Troy, yesterday, was part of those costs of the conservator included that process to come in and do that kind of cleaning and as along with the grout replacement.
That way we're kind of, everything is then at a clean slate in terms of treatment once the repair is done and the cleaning is done on the rest of it, whatever needs to be done to keep it in a stable state. And then we can kind of build an ongoing maintenance plan from there.
Right, and one thing I just wanted to let the committee know too, there are some additional costs that are not included on their estimate. Taking a look at some of the plaques that are around the base of the globe, some of those have been damaged and need to be replaced. Some of them need to be repaired. So that wasn't figured into there. I went and took just kind of a brief inspection of the fence itself, the perimeter fence. There are quite a few areas of rust on there. And so what we're also proposing that is added to this, as long as we're taking care of the globe, let's, take a look at the fence and get those areas of rust arrested and recoated so that we can, it's basically a new, back to somewhat original condition.
I would almost suggest that we even reconsider the fence. I think it visually it detracts from the globe. I've always looked at it and thought it looks like a little fence you would have at a zoo, and the globe is kind of like it's a zoo animal. So I know that there's probably a desire to have some sort of barrier that prevents people from getting up there and interacting or touching or graffitiing or whatever, but there might be another more elegant solution to a barrier.
Mhm.
And
So, yeah, so what we were thinking about is just, just with getting rid of the rust and recoating that, putting the same fence back up. But if there's another option, if there's some different way that you want to go with a fence, obviously that increases the cost of the estimate.
Mhm.
And because this is more of a scoping type thing, depending on how this goes out, whether we send it out for bid or or doing like an RFP, a request for proposals from conservators to do the work, there is some city staff costs that would be needed to be added to this. And typically, whenever we do projects like this, we added what we call a contingency to it. And because we're just scoping this out, what that contingency does is it kind of elevates the estimate a little bit. And so as we go through the design and the specifications and put things together, those costs get a little bit tighter and tighter and tighter, but the contingency is there just so that there's enough budget to be able to take care of any unknowns. If we get into doing something, we find out, oh, well, we need to do the lights, or there's a couple of areas since the conservator scoped this out, a couple areas are loosened up. We'll need to do those too. So it just gives you a little bit more flexibility to, if something else happens, that you have enough budget to take care of that, some of those unknowns.
So currently the budget is running somewhere around 250,000, Troy. So if you were to tack on another 100,000, would that be enough to take care of some of these contingencies you're thinking about?
We were estimating, any repairs with the fence would run probably close to about $20,000, because depending on how they took care of that, whether they took the fence down, whether we're able to arrest the rust and just recoat those in specific areas and put it back up, or just do it in place. But my thinking is we're going to need to put scaffolding up to take care of these areas where the tile's bulging, so that fence is going to need to come down anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
Looking at the fence, it was put together in about 10-foot sections, so that can be loosened up from the base and then slid out section at a time. And while they're working on the globe, they could have another contractor just take care of the rust problems with the fence too. And so with any city costs, we typically add about 25% of the construction cost, and then we're recommending a contingency of 30%. So that it would probably be a little bit more than $100,000, probably more like 150. So we'd be closer around the $400,000 range, just to make sure we're covered with everything, and that, and what we want to do is, in the original estimate that we gave to you, we were assuming that we would use volunteer labor for a lot of this. The concern we've had about that is, with volunteer labor, sometimes you don't get the quality control that you would expect from a contractor. And being able to, having to come in and repair this, we would want to have a certified and licensed contractor take care of these repairs, so that we do have the quality control with not only the product, but also the application. And then they would typically provide like a 1 year or so warranty on their work. So if anything happened within that year, then we could come back in and have them take care of any problems that happened before we would go ahead and release them and their bonding. So if that makes sense to you all.
Totally. I do think that we have been talking about volunteers recreating some of the tiles that have been broken due to the falling onto the ground.
Yeah, I think that seems to still make perfect sense if we can.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? This has been very helpful. And thank you, Heather, for moving forward on all of the logistics to get this report back to us so that we could consider it this morning.
Yeah, thank you. So it sounds like, I don't know if you'd heard, we need to get the report finalized by next Tuesday or Wednesday at the latest. I've sent to other staff too to see who else might be interested in weighing in. Per the discussion that Troy and I had with them yesterday, we were asking them to add a discussion, more in-depth discussion of asbestos and the fact that it's encapsulated and not causing cause for concern. We were asking that they add more detail to the kind of bid items that they have broken out in the cost estimate, a bit more detail on what that means. I mean, she was mentioning the conservator time. They're thinking this is going to be a 6-week likely project to complete. And so I'd like to see some of that stuff broken out in those costs. I think per today, we're asking them to add a bit more detail on moving forward, what the maintenance might look like. And then I think we have some more additions with regard to the fence. And I know they were talking about adding a statement about contingency. So Troy, you and I probably need to get together to consolidate any additional thoughts. And then if you guys have additional comments or questions or thoughts that you'd like to get incorporated, let me know as soon as you can.
I guess this would have been a question more for Jen, but perhaps you can answer this, Heather. What guarantee do we have that that ARG's diagnosis of this was accurate, and that they will come back to repair if there's anything that goes wrong with it in a certain period of time afterwards?
Which is the lifespan of the grout, as I understood her
Correct.
response
Yes.
to the earlier question. I do think one factor in answering that question is that what level of diligence the city will bring to an annual inspection and soft removal of biologic material that grows and troubleshoots any issues with the grout.
I also think it requires a way of looking at the art, the outside artwork that we have that by the city, that each individual piece has its own maintenance protocol.
Mm-hmm.
And that is written down, and so that when 20 years from now, they can just go to that protocol and know exactly how to take care of that piece, different than all the other pieces in the collection. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that's really been striking me with the various different artworks that we have, is each one is so individual. It needs to be treated that way, and it needs to be recorded that way somewhere.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Eileen. Kelly? You're muted.
When was the tile first put on? Does anybody know that?
I believe it was 2002, 2003 that was finished.
So it's made it 17 years with virtually no upkeep, really, right?
It's had upkeep. It has been pressure washed, and I do know that there was a time when the volunteers, the group that first put tiles on, were coming fairly regularly to keep it clean. But I believe the city took it over after that. Is that correct, Heather?
I don't know for sure. I'd have to look back. I know a timeline was requested before. I could still work on that. I don't know the year.
I think, overly aggressive power washing by untrained folks has been a problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Wouldn't help.
It's easy to overdo it and then not see damage, and then have, given our weather, look outside today.
Mm-hmm.
Bad things happen.
See, and I think that's something that can be added to what we want to do. We've got a good idea of what needs to be done. We probably would take this back to them and get a little bit more refinement. They would need to drop some specifications for us, and then we'd also ask them to put together like maintenance recommendations.
Yeah.
Like the how, what, and why, and the cycles that things need to be done. just so that all that stuff has been documented, and that, you know, whoever takes care of that can go back to that document and say, okay, well, this is what we're supposed to do. Here's how we're supposed to do it.
Troy, I don't think I didn't answer Eileen's question. Would you have more input on guaranteeing kind of ARG's assessment and how that is written out in?
No, I don't. Typically with, like I mentioned before, typically with construction projects, there's a 1-year performance guarantee. So if anything happens during that first year, whether it's, you know, take for example, streets, whatnot, if asphalt goes bad, we see a lot of cracking in the curbs, a lot of things that happen like that, we'll have the contractor come back. We'll do like a 10-month inspection, have the contractor come back and remediate those areas. Something like this, I'm not sure what type of guarantee there would be.
Okay, I mean,
we would definitely have to explore that further.
and I think the only other option that we do have a secondary contract on record with Heritage. I mean, it would be bringing another firm in maybe to do it or to review the report, get a second opinion, I guess, if we felt that was needed.
Personally, I don't really see that as necessary, but because this is actually in keeping with what Robert Kruger had said. A lot of what he said is very reminiscent of Jen's remarks today are very reminiscent of what he told us at that point. So, but I would not like to see us in this cycle of getting everything done, everything looks pristine, and another 2 years down the road, we're right back where we started again. And the city doesn't have unlimited funds to keep repairing it at the cost of $250,000+ a pop. So.
And those maintenance costs would be a lot lower going forward once this is done.
Right.
This is just kind of one of those issues when, you know, if nothing gets attended to, then, you know, things tend to go bad and go bad in a big way. So then the costs are a lot more than if they were just, if there was continual maintenance.
Kelly, you have your hand up.
Yeah, a question. So, I mean, or just kind of maybe a summary a bit. So it seems to me that if we do this and if we maintain it properly, I would hope that we would get at least 20 years, don't you think? You know, I mean, the current situation has gone 17 years or so and is failing. And if we can maintain it and if the grout works well, that, you know, I'd hope that we could get at least 20 years. But, you know, let's face it, it's out there in the weather. Sooner or later, we're going to be back to this point again, I would think, even if we maintain it well. And so it comes this question of, you know, every 20 years, are we going to have to put in, you know, 250 to whatever, you know, $300,000, $400,000 to have this redone? And, you know, I mean, we've gotten a lot of enjoyment out of, you know, 17 years of it as it is. So I just kind of want to bring that up. It seems like even if we do this and it's maintained well, sooner or later, we're going to have to be doing this again just because of the nature of what it is. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we are talking about the lifespan of the grout.
Yeah.
And whatever, you know, that is projected to be. This does just bring up the big issue of these outdoor pieces that are gifted to the city that come with an unanticipated price tag that can be quite high. I do think, and I was down at the site with Heather and Jen that morning. This has become an iconic part of Riverfront Park. You know, it's beloved. It's now part of the circulation pattern of the park, connected to the bridge. You know, even the day we were there, it was horrible weather. There was a mom with 2 boys picking out animals and looking at continents, and they were completely immersed in this thing. And, you know, I'd like to be practical, but I'd like to think that, you know, if this is important to the city, this would be built into whatever the ongoing maintenance needs are for the greater collection. And, you know, if we want to protect what we have, you know, these outdoor pieces, there's a cost. And there's a responsibility to take care of things without letting them get to a crisis point, you know, as we've gotten to with the Echo Globe. Okay, so Heather, you kind of outlined next steps. Are there more that we should consider as a group this morning?
Well, I think, again, I guess just to repeat, I think unless there's concern, the idea forward is to finalize this report and pass it on. We don't have 240,000 or 400,000 as Troy was saying. So I think the next step would be just to finalize this. You know, it was requested that we get a cost estimate that maybe gets handed to our legislators. There's a lot of need right now, so I don't know. You know, it's not a guarantee that it's going to go anywhere, but we could certainly, unless there's opposition, finalize the report and move it on to the legislative committee, see what they have to say, and maybe the request is made and we go from there.
Well, I definitely support that. Rachel?
Oh, I was just going to add that we talked about this in the past, that perhaps a way forward in terms of money is going to be a community-based fundraising initiative. And I was thinking about the fact that, you know, this is going to be a focal point with the new amphitheater and the Rotary. They are closing in on their goal. I think they're close to meeting their $4 million fundraising goal. They've just announced a new match with the Epping Family Foundation. So I'm just wondering, is there a way to pull them into this conversation as well? It's kind of an interesting dovetail in terms of their mission. The Rotary International is very, you know, globally focused, and here we have a globe. So I'm just wondering if they can be part of the conversation in terms of not necessarily spearheading a campaign, but helping generate awareness and getting that ball rolling. They already have a built-in audience that have contributed to the campaign that they're just about to complete. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And as I looked at those plaques for the donors around the globe, there are many individuals and businesses who are connected to the Rotary who are there. Jane Griggs has been part of the leadership for the Rotary Amphitheater project. She's a former SPAC member. You know, we could invite her to a meeting or have a conversation with her before our next meeting. But I do think, you know, as you think about just improvements to Salem, the amphitheater is going to be one. The globe is definitely part of the, you know, the ecology around it. And it just makes sense to have the conversation, especially if, you know, there could be some improvement to the globe before or at the same time as the amphitheater opens. Spencer, when is that, since CB2's got that project, when is that supposed to be complete?
I think it's supposed to be, they're pouring the foundation soon. So I'm thinking that it's going to be close towards summer, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's what it says on the Rotary
Yeah, so
website.
it's going to be close.
Yeah, I think that I'm hopeful that the city's legislative committee, you know, or team will, especially with a $400,000 price tag as opposed to anything higher, would put this on a list for consideration. You know, in the capital project world, it's not a big dollar amount. And then, you know, often these state appropriations come with, you know, the understanding that there's going to be money raised on a local level. But I think we need to be just aware that there are multiple capital campaigns underway. You know, the Center for Hope and Safety, the Y, the Gospel Mission, the Rotary Amphitheater, the hospital. And we don't have we have a community that gives, but I think that, you know, we're in strange times. But I think a conversation with Chain about the Rotary would be very appropriate, and I think we should do it before our December meeting and come back with a report, or have her join us.
Right. Unfortunately, I do need to go, but I appreciate being able to be involved with this conversation. And if there's anything else that I can do to help or need from me, just let Heather know and she can pass that on to me.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us this morning, Troy.
Thank you.
Are we ready to move on to the police station? Well, it looked like the street division is open now. I haven't been over to the site on foot, but the sculpture is definitely a visual element, you know, as you're driving by. It's big and it's beautifully made. Heather referred Wendy Brokaw from CC Media to me about doing a video interview, and she has already interviewed Blessing by Zoom, and I agreed to an interview. It's going to happen next Tuesday. She seems like she's a big arts supporter. She seems very thoughtful. She is the woman who interviewed Blessing when we had that meet and greet at the convention center. So she knows that there's been a public component. But I guess the question that I talked with Heather about is whether, and now of course we're in some very strict gathering limitations by the governor, but are there things that we should be thinking about in terms of, you know, some very small group, 5 or 6 people, here's the sculpture, this is what it's about, what have you, or should we hold off? People have asked about a media release. I don't know, thoughts from all of you.
I did start a media release. I haven't got very far, and I've started updates to our webpage to kind of pull that out onto its own page. I just haven't been able to get, like I said, very far on that. But that is in the works. I don't see why that would be an issue if folks agreed to at least get that out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth it. I'll be curious to hear the kinds of questions that Wendy Brokaw asks. She seems interested in kind of the process of how Blessing was ultimately selected. So of course, you know, we put out an RFQ, we had some finalists, we had finalist presentations. I was going to try to put together a timeline of kind of just the flow of activity in the process. It seems like it may not be prudent for us to plan anything on the site until things kind of clear up, if they do in the near future. Eileen?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Chris. I can't really see that happening, but I do think that what Rachel recommended last month was the website and publicity. All that can be done, and at least get the word out for people, and it'll become an icon just like the Globe pretty quickly. I mean, I've already had people remark it and just how beautiful it is. So far so good.
Yeah, and it is beautifully constructed. You know, just her crew did an amazing job. I know that there's a problem with the lighting, so also getting that resolved. And I'm not sure if that is Blessing's responsibility or the project.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. There was folks supposedly on site, I think as of yesterday, doing repairs. There was one issue, and then I learned yesterday from Angie, unfortunately, that the lighting, it had multiplied. There was another lighting issue, but hopefully people are here working on it. It was supposed to be, or they thought it would be repaired by Friday.
Oh, great.
So hopefully, because that's
Yeah,
a piece.
great. Do we need further discussion on Equitas then?
I guess I have one question. Did we take a formal vote on this? As
To accept the piece
accepting it into the
collection?
collection?
Oh, ooh.
Well, I think that we should not do that until the lighting is repaired.
Okay.
And that every one of us makes a physical inspection of the piece.
Mm.
After the Mattingly mural, every single time I'm going to ask that question now.
Yeah, I think you're very good point. But I do think I'd like everybody to go over there and just take a look at it. I also think before we accept it, we should get a maintenance plan from Blessing. And I don't know whether her contract through the general contractor required her submission of a maintenance plan, but that should be part of any contract for public artworks. So before we accept it, I think that we should get that from Blessing.
Okay.
That was discussed, by the way, too, when the artists were being interviewed. Every single one was asked. We need to have a maintenance plan.
Mm-hmm.
So I know it's on her radar.
Well, I hope so, because we're not managing her contract. So whoever needs to get that maintenance plan to Heather so that it becomes part of the permanent record with the city collection.
Mm-hmm. I'll reach out to Ricardo on that or Blessing. I did send Blessing an email last week. It was brought to my attention that she hadn't really heard from anybody. So, and was hoping everybody was pleased with the sculpture. I sent her just a quick email apologizing. It's been, busy, crazy month, but that we were all, I felt very pleased with it. It was beautiful, and looking to do a media release and updates on our website as well. She seemed pleased with that and just stated that she'd love to return and see it at some point when she can. So that's all I have. But yeah, I can reach out to her if needed for the maintenance. But I'll probably start with Ricardo and see what he has.
He may have it
Mm-hmm.
because somebody authorized her final payment, probably Ricardo.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that once the building and the landscaping, everything's complete on the exterior, that CB2 will be having professional photography done.
Yeah, most likely for the building, and that probably will include the sculpture.
Okay, I'm just wondering if there's a way to maybe piggyback on and get a couple of really nice images that could be used.
I can ask. Yeah, that'd be great.
And we have a photographer for the city who does most of our graphic designs, David Barker. He's taken a few pictures already, and he was going to go back after the lighting was fixed and try to get some at dusk as well. And I was thinking maybe some close-ups of some of the text.
Of the words, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Okay, should we move on to the library?
Sure. So just before I guess we do, it sounds like I should try to add that to our December 9th is our next meeting, that we may accept that piece if the lighting's repaired and folks can get by and inspect that.
Yes, that'd be great.
And then again, I'm going to try to get back to the web updates and the media release and send that out to those who are interested to help me get that polished before we release that. I think that's it. I said that last month. I apologize, Rachel. I didn't get that out.
Okay. It's busy.
Okay.
So let's move on to the library. And I don't really have an update, but and I'm behind on things. When I spoke to Amanda Wojcik weeks ago, she mentioned that the University of Oregon, where she's on the faculty, has a protocol for artist check-ins during public art selection processes at U of O. And she sent that to me, and I need to forward it on to Heather. And I think it could be useful for us moving forward with pieces. But I guess the question that I have about the library is, Amanda Wojcik was selected for the interior wall piece at the library. The selection committee, which includes a couple of us, requested some modifications to her design. And we had an informal kind of studio walkthrough that was pretty loose. And we did not set a timeline for further conversations with Amanda and then bringing something back to SPAC in terms of her final design concept. When I had just an email with Amanda, she suggested a check-in with her in early December. And I think that might be useful because if I'm remembering correctly, she suggested a date that was prior to the SPAC meeting, which I think is on December 9th. But I do think that, especially looking back at the Equitas situation where the final list of words and phrases did not come back to SPAC for final approval. And then we had a concern about a few of the phrases. There was a change order at the end. I'd like to just try to have ensure for some process improvements with the library so that there are regular check-ins with SPAC so that A, all of us know where something's going, and then B, there are no surprises and things proceed as planned, which I think they largely did with Equitas, except for a few of those phrases. Anyway, I've just had other projects of my own, so I haven't even looped back to Sarah at the library or the architects at Hacker. But I do think creating some kind of a process that has, regular check-ins would be a good idea. Am I making sense about that? And then I guess the other, so that's one issue for the library. The other question that I had, because there's been, and Eileen, I think you've been part of this subgroup, is where do things stand in terms of plotting out the reinstall plan for the works that are going back into the library, including the Setzel, and then Betty Leduc, where do things stand with her?
There have been discussions about a couple of pieces. And the Leduc piece was one of them because that was an actual part of the discussion before Betty agreed to the library as a site. So there are a couple of spots that are kind of marked out for particular pieces. But as for the rest of the work, and Paula, jump in anytime you want. As far as the rest of the work, it doesn't make any sense to try to figure out where things go until the library gets to a state of completion so that we can look at the walls and see the lighting and all that, which are the absolute necessity information that an installer would have to have. So we've talked a lot to the library about that, and they are on board waiting. I know they're anxious to move forward, but it's really a mistake. It's like putting the cart before the horse.
Okay, great. Well, it's good to have that.
Oh, I just we do know that all of the work will not fit back in the library, so that is going to be an issue when that time comes.
Yeah.
There's also conversations about what we'll go back in, and we have gone through the list with folks and kind of checked off things that we really were adamant about going back in the library. But that's going to be a whole process once we're able to get into that space. And there was a lot of concern about the new look of the library and the open, more contemporary, airy sort of space, and wanting the artwork that goes back in to kind of mirror that a bit. So anyway, but it's something that's going to happen once we're able to get into the space, finished space.
So it sounds like a parallel conversation is what will happen to the work that doesn't go back to the library.
Yeah, and we don't really even know which pieces will or won't go in. So again, I wish it could be a little bit more solid, but that's about where we're at. I think both Paula and I are on the same page as far as how to go about that. We haven't really talked about who is going to install it. That will be another thing that we need to discuss. Maybe we could hire Jonathan again to do that. I saw that head shake.
Probably not. You could, well, Silas Cook, who does the installation work at the museum and works all over the place, I'm sure he would be willing to put a bid in for that.
And I'm sure that all of the people who are not working right now for other visual arts organizations would, if the city wants to contract for that installation, putting out an RFP for that seems appropriate.
Yeah. So I just have a question though about developing the list of works that are going to go back into the library. Is it possible to go through what was taken out and kind of do a quick, this isn't going back in, to then narrow it down to possibilities for reinstall? And then once there's access to the space, then call it.
We actually have done that already,
Yeah.
Rachel.
Oh, okay.
But again, it's kind of on a superficial at this point. There are some pieces that are definitely not going in, and the foundations collection, Kate has already donated some of that collection to other places, so they're not going in. So there has been a bit of a culling, but not from the city's collection side.
We worked with the Library Foundation folks. They kind of wanted our opinion on what we thought was important for them to keep in their collection, and also what we thought would be really important to go back into the libraries. Yeah, so we did go through that with their collection. I thought we also looked at our collection and made notes of what we absolutely wanted to go back, not necessarily what didn't want to go back.
Yeah, and then the next question is, if not everything goes back, then where will it go?
Right. Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of options.
Yep. Okay. Well, would it be okay, going back to Amanda Wojcik, for me to reply to her and to you, Heather, and suggest a meeting in early December? And then we would pull together the selection committee for the library so that she would have a chance to formally give an update on the latest iteration of her design concept.
Absolutely. That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful. I don't want to see any surprises. And I'm very excited about the new kind of look and feel for the library. I drove by again and saw the windows that are going to be opened up, and it's just going to become a light and airy place instead of kind of an orange and wood place.
I can't speak to anyone's schedule, but I know the other thing that I threw out at the last meeting was we can do a tour, this group, at any point. I just need to get that request in. And I don't know, maybe we could ask Amanda if she might be interested in coming back up. I'm sure she's very busy, but that might be an option as well. Otherwise, I can get that scheduled if that's a priority for, I'm sure it'd be interesting. I don't know if we want to wait or do it a couple different times. So again, my apologies for not getting that set yet, but we can still do that.
I'd love a tour. My schedule is flexible. And especially if it could be combined with a meeting with Amanda.
Yeah.
So that, again, everybody's on the same page about things moving forward.
Okay.
Next thing on the list is the convention center. So Home Pool by Richard Thompson is the piece that's being acquired. The Oregon Artist Series Foundation did contribute $6,000 towards the purchase, and that check was delivered to the city. We were waiting for an invoice from the Thompsons to come into the city. I emailed Rebecca Ziegler late yesterday to just see if that invoice had come in, and I didn't get a reply from her yet. So I hope it did, so that the city has everything that it needs, and so that the Richard Thompson can get paid. Kimberly, his wife, asked whether the city would do a media release about the acquisition, and I think that definitely, once everything is kind of squared away. And right now, the convention center's closed, and most of their staff has been laid off. So, there's not a rush on the delivery of the piece. And that was another question that was on the table. How is this piece going to get from McMinnville to Salem? We have someone from Oregon Artist Series Foundation, Stephen Adams, who said he could go over with a truck and just bring the painting back if that was helpful. So I guess the question is, kind of where things are. Richard Thompson is in poor health. He's in hospice care. Michael, you've been closest to this. Have you had any updates?
Well, the last update was when I still don't know the status of his health. I backed way out of it, giving them space. I think the last email I sent, I went back and just let everybody know when I first requested the invoice, what that date was, and all the information that I had requested as part of that, just so that we didn't have multiple people coming back at him asking her at different times for like, oh, we need this too. So she knows what was asked. I have not heard from her, nor have I tried to contact her. I haven't confirmed if Stephen had done anything, which is a little odd. I don't know how that works within the scope of SPAC, of him being involved. I was just trying to respect the family and give them some time, and now it's been a few weeks. So if and then I was waiting for this meeting to learn if any progress had been made by anybody else in SPAC, if Heather had heard anything from Kimberly, et cetera. I'm happy to get back to re-engage with that. If we haven't confirmed that an invoice was sent, have we got any sort of heads up that yes, it was produced and sent, or it's still up in the air?
I think that the invoice was sent, but it would have gone to Rebecca. So, and I also have just been not in contact with the Thompsons. I mean, Richard Thompson is expected to die. My interest is getting the media release out before that happens. He's in poor condition.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard anything other than what you just said. So, I mean, it wouldn't be surprising if he had already passed. I've looked on the internet to see if there was any obvious mentions through the city, Dayton, or anybody had called that out. So I have not seen anything. But again, I'd be happy to go back. I have a bit of a relationship but again, I was just waiting till I didn't know which way things were going to go, and I thought it would be inappropriate to keep asking. They were dealing with some.
Oh, I suggest that, Heather, maybe you reach out to Rebecca, just figure out what the status is, and then, if once he is paid and the city takes possession of the piece, I think a media release is appropriate. The Oregon Arts Watch has a writer in Yamhill County, David Bates, who is always looking for content. And I think we could get a story, if we can get all this pulled together.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. And
as far as the timing of the delivery, I guess as long as, once we confirm invoice and payment, there's no rush, as you mentioned. But we also would want some sort of agreement. I guess Steven said he could do transportation. That's great. I could help with that with him. Just in terms of what length of time, given the pieces paid for by the city, that it's not in possession of the city. A lag time, I just don't know how that works. I mean, it would still be in Richard's possession, but then how does everyone feel, in terms of timing? Should we make it more of an effort to, once we confirm payment, to get it out of their possession and store it in the convention center?
And the city might have rules about some of that stuff. It wouldn't surprise me if they did. Like maybe you want to have the painting delivered, at the time of payment. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the only last piece that I would see that we'd want to just confirm, and not have 6 months go by to retrieve it and gain possession of it. Just in terms of, you never know if something happens liability wise, it's paid for and not in the possession of the city.
Right.
So I can ask Rebecca about that as well. Thank you. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, and I can coordinate anything with Steven as well and be part of that, to make sure that it's handled well. And it's a big piece, so a dry day, or if it's a covered vehicle or whatever, I can work with Steven to make sure that the scenario meets the needs. So
okay. Should we move on to some other updates? Mattingly mural. There's a twisted story.
Do you want to start it, Heather?
Yeah, I can try. Feel free to jump in whenever. So we'd heard briefly at the last meeting that the Elsinore had expressed interest in using the image of theatrical hardscape for some upcoming promotional items. I think they were thinking of cards, bags, wine labels. So we started looking into it, how that, what would be SPAC's role. It sounds like they'd been in conversation with the artist estate and had tentatively received verbal approval, but so what was our role? And so we started looking into that, and I asked our attorney, and he said, well, what's the agreement say, quite honestly? And so I looked for the agreement, which I could not find. There was a document from 1984, I think, that we turned up, that was when it was commissioned, and it was the Mid-Willamette Valley Arts Council, who I guess has dissolved, who signed that on with Urban Renewal Department, but it in no way, and our attorney confirmed it, did not show that the city had any possession or ownership of the mural. And so we continued to dig, and it turns out there was some discussions. I think it was 2017 with the subcommittee of the Art Commission talking, that you guys spoke about it. It sounds like, and what was recommended is that we hold off on accepting it into the collection until there was discussions and some kind of formal agreement with the Elsinore Theater. And so I looked, and Eileen looked back through the records that we have, and it never, and I asked staff at the time, and it looks like nothing was found. So it looks like That was kind of brought to the table, and then that was a busy year. I think that's the year that we had the new murals downtown. The police station was just getting started, and so there was a lot going on, and it just looks like that was never finalized. So I guess the long of the short is there's no record. It does not appear that the Matting mural is actually part of the city's collection.
So, do we need to do anything about this?
I still need to, it's still marked, we have our online catalog,
Mhm.
and I haven't been able, I need to get into the office. I can't make web updates via Citrix, via the distant through my laptop. So I need to get in the office and I can make a change. We do have other pieces listed online that are not part of the city's collection, but maybe some of the foundation's pieces are up there and whatnot. So I can clarify that there. It looks like the, and I'm going to say it wrong, the geese powers.
Right. Yeah.
That was also considered, and the group decided we should probably wait on that. So that was never, we don't have anything documenting that that's part of the collection either. So I need to get online and make those updates.
Actually, the East one too, Heather, it was in a meeting and it was actually taken out of the list.
Oh, it was, okay, thank
Yes.
you.
So, and somewhere I do have the date of that meeting, but it was very clear that it was not
acceptable.
chosen to be part of the collection.
Okay.
So
I had a question.
everything else was accepted, but not that one. Sorry, Michael, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. The last time, Eileen, you had mentioned their desire to use this, but then you'd also mentioned a couple occasions that the muralist who produced the mural is not the artist. Is that right?
Well,
who painted it on the actual wall? There was a bit of a translation.
No, it was, no, definitely the artist who conceived of the image is the one who painted it. However, the redo, which happened in 2013, was a different artist. And while he used the feeling of Mattingly's art, he also brought to it his own artistic
So
style.
the question is the original artwork that Mattingly conceived this piece to become a mural, does it exist as a painting?
Yes, actually it does. There's one painting that I'm also part of the Friends of the Mattingly mural, which was the group that fundraised for the redo and oversaw it.
So if that's the case, if that's the case, the rights to that artwork is still the artist's, would be the original painting. For reproduction purposes, I wouldn't assume that someone was going to try to photograph the wall and that's what would end up on a coffee mug or a wine label. So to me, given the artist retained the rights, you're trying to just acquire the rights from the artist for use of the original, photograph of the high-res photograph of the original painting, so that when it's reproduced at high quality, it represents the quality of the art. The mural doesn't have anything to do with it in my mind. For them to want to use it. Yeah.
That's actually correct. The image is separate from the physical mural itself. They have gone ahead and because Friends of the Mattingly mural have worked with Donnie Mattingly on the wording for the contract between the Elsinore and Donnie Mattingly. And so that is now signed, sealed, and delivered.
Oh, okay.
And so they are going to have 3 items. One of them is the wine label. There are tote bags and note cards. And what we did, we asked that it would be limited. And so there's a one year agreement that would have to be revisited. And Donnie has full ability to say yes or no to anything that comes through, and they will be checking back with her on all of that before they release them.
That's good. It sounds like things were resolved in a positive way.
I'm very happy with it. I'll tell you, it's very nice because while we were working on the redo, we had a less than good relationship with the executive director at that point. And Tom Phone has been very positive, and he recognizes the value of it, both to the city and to the Elsinore itself. So I'm very happy with that.
Yeah.
So in terms of from our perspective, the only other thing before I forget is that we did include that in our scavenger hunt, and it still is, which is, we've got that as a discussion. We can correct that online. I think the brochure that we made doesn't necessarily clarify, but that's maybe not the end of the world. It's a piece of public art, but just clarifying here today that it's never been accepted into the collection.
Kelly?
So, so since it has not been accepted into the commission, then at some point there was a donation that was proposed that it would be, or, I mean, how does it come forward to the commission, and is that still a valid point that we could put it in the collection?
I would have to look back at your discussions in 2017. I don't know. I would think that Elsinore would have to express interest, which they may, because there is some maintenance needs. They may be looking for additional support down the road. For that's the only reason that I could consider.
The again, building on what Michael was saying, the actual ownership of the mural is not the Elsinore. It's not the city. It's one of those ones, and that's how it came up in the first place. It was one of those artworks that is prominent in the city, but Courtney called them orphan artworks. And so she did quite an extensive drive to get these all kind of brought into the collection or not, but just decisions made. And we were working on them as a group. And the mural was just one piece of artwork with all the other kind of alley artworks that are throughout the downtown area. And that, I think, is where the problem happened, because we did accept quite a few into the collection at one point, just all together. But the mural was kept out because Courtney had not yet talked to the Elsinore, because the Elsinore does have to have some kind of contract with the city before we go forward with it.
Right.
Yeah, just for clarification, I don't know how the Mattingly mural could be considered an orphaned work, because it's obvious who owns the copyright to it, seems to me. But
Right, but I think that Courtney had a more inclusive philosophy about adding works to the city collection than I might have today, given the history of the last year and a half. And she considered the fact that the urban renewal district made a payment, they made a contribution towards the production of a mural at the Elsinore, not a James Mattingly piece. And the owner, I think the ownership does not trace back directly to the city of Salem making a purchase. So whether the city, I don't disagree that it has become an iconic work of public art downtown. And it's on a building that the city doesn't own. And this thing, it is going to require lots of maintenance moving forward to keep it in the condition that it was in when Dan Cohen did his retouch. So I don't know, this is well, it's not a complicated issue for me because I wouldn't put it in the city's collection. But I think I'm not sure that we have time to drill into this fully today.
I was just going to make one last comment that if there was an easement protecting it, even to know,
There isn't.
I mean, this idea like, hey, there was an easement, there wasn't, it's expired if there was.
No, there
Yeah, I
isn't
couldn't
any
find any.
easement. But this has happened, not the exact same situation, but the YMCA easement also wasn't complete because the Y never returned the paperwork. And they had been sent the paperwork and told that they needed to sign off, but they never did finish it off. So the easement would be a nice clean way of it, of connecting the city to it, but there is no easement.
Where I was just thinking of just the easement in terms of just as a piece of art, protecting it for a set period of time. The reproduction of the original art seems to be a route to protecting, it's as, if the mural can't be maintained, again, because there's a shortage of funds all around, especially now in COVID times. I think that the best way to preserve that would be through a really great litho poster or something. If you go to like the Elsinore framing, and there's several maps and things that I see over and over and over in Salem that fall in that category of a really important piece of art that was a mural. Just seems like it does have a lot of value, even if it doesn't still maintain its mural status over time.
Yeah, well, I obviously I'm more invested probably than anybody else on the commission, but I would like to talk about this with everybody. I have a lot of reasons why I think we should retain it, or actually not retain it, but actually accept it in. And we were moving in that direction in 2017, and that's why we all felt it had already been done. It was on the website, and we just never did do it. We just never said the formal, yes, bring it in. Now it's a different group of people on the commission now, so maybe that wouldn't happen. But it has become an extremely important artwork in the downtown area. It actually signals from the east the entrance into the downtown area, the historic area. So that alone makes me think that it's a responsibility of ours to make sure that it continues to look good, or end it, one or the other. Because right now, as it's deteriorating, it's looking worse and worse and worse all the time.
I think this is a longer conversation. Maybe we
Yeah.
can schedule some more time at our December meeting. And I think that, the Elsinore needs to be involved. I mean, this is on a building that the city does not own.
Yeah.
So I'd like us to be very careful and deliberate as we move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, there's another complication too, Chris, is that it's on a historic building. So
I know, but I did go back and
Yeah.
read the National Register nomination for the Elsinore Theater, which does not mention the exterior mural at all.
which would make sense because it doesn't date back to the time that would allow it to be a historic building.
Right.
So anyway, there's a lot of different ins and outs on this, and so it would require a pretty extensive discussion before we do anything about it. The Elsinore is quite happy now to have it on the back of their building, but of course they have no money and they have their own maintenance issues as well.
I think it would also be worth having a conversation with Kimberly Fitzgerald and the Landmarks Commission to see whether this mural itself should be landmarked by the city.
That's an interesting idea.
And
She was part of when we were first considering repainting it. Kimberly was part of the discussion.
Yeah, she's a good resource within the community. Okay, shall we talked a little bit about the scavenger hunt. Heather, is there more that we should know about?
Not a whole lot, I guess. I sent the link, I think, to everybody. So take a look if you haven't already. Our GIS staff just kind of mirrored. We had one other project this summer that we did a scavenger hunt in Riverfront Park for Public Works Day. And so before we hadn't really done anything like this. So I think they kind of just mirrored that effort to get images of the artwork that we have in the brochure kind of online, and you can kind of scroll through it. I think it's cool. I think to be a bit more user friendly for folks who aren't as familiar with the collection, maybe we would consider adding some additional clues just to make it a little easier for folks to find. It's difficult for me. It would be difficult, I think, for people who aren't maybe from the area or don't have the background. But otherwise, just take a look, please, if you will, and I can resend the link. I did give a box of flyers and the link to Kate from the Library Foundation as well, because she's going to share it as part of the Our Salem Reads for 2021.
Great.
That's it.
Okay. And how, if I wanted to get a stack of the hard copy scavenger hunt brochures, could I get that eventually?
Yes, we still have, I don't know how many, but we still have a few boxes, I think, sitting in my office. And in fact, I was hoping as Kate does her promotion, maybe we could get our flyers out again as well. Yeah.
I mean, if I could get a bunch of the scavenger hunt things, families in my neighborhood would use them for sure.
Great.
People are really looking for activities these days.
As well, the link is not easy to find. I'm sorry. I am going to add that to the website update so people can see it cleaner. I'm sorry, Rachel.
Oh, that's okay. When did you send the scavenger hunt link?
I think, didn't I send that as part of, let me just plan to resend it. I think I sent
Sorry,
it.
I just couldn't find it.
Yeah, I can resend that to the group. I think I sent it with the packet a week ago now in that email.
And then what about the Rivers condominiums?
I threw that on the agenda just so folks were aware. I can send that link again in just a minute.
I found it. It's in the agenda.
Great.
Sorry.
I just want folks to be aware that we had heard Courtney had got a call, and then I got a call from a gal, and I just forgot her name right now, who's moving into the the Rivers, who expressed interest again and has been in discussion with the HOA about having a mural again on that building, a large one. And they actually have an artist in mind and a concept in mind. The artist, I think, was from Seattle area. But no funding as of yet. So she had just brought it to my attention. I did send again, I don't know if they'd had before, the application materials, and I shared the process with her. I've also reached out to Urban Development. I know they have a grant program for the renewal area, a capital improvement grant program. I've not yet heard back to see for sure if funding from that program could help. But I just wanted to share that had been expressed. There was also a couple of other interests expressed to me for murals. One was on the Cakes building downtown. And I've not yet, I was supposed to receive some details from those folks that I haven't yet. Another was for Furbish. I don't know if you guys have been Furbish, kind of on 12th Street, I think. Both of those, I sent the application materials, kind of described again the process, and I haven't heard back. So, but the interest keeps coming in. Again, we'll see if there's any funding, and if folks want to move forward on the Rivers, they're hoping at this point for something maybe next summer if they could have the funding in place.
Great. Well, maybe they'll have an update by our December meeting, and maybe, you could share whatever information you have about what their artist and concept looks like.
Sure.
I did just drive by Furbish the other day, and they've got the north side of their building must be the wall that they're talking about. they had hoped to start kind of a night market just north of on the north side of their building. The lot is fenced off, and I think that due to the COVID stuff, that did not happen, but they have a pretty active business going on down there. Okay, maybe just a couple of things for the good of the order. I had happened to be talking with a neighbor who's on the Salem Main Street Association board, and he told me about a holiday promotion that they're doing with businesses downtown with holiday lights, and they are trying to find artists to paint the windows of some downtown businesses. And I guess they've got some high school students that are going to work on that. But he did say that that JCPenney has offered up its windows for a series of window display installations, window paintings, what have you. And they're looking for some artists to do that. I shared it with a number of people I know, and at least one person expressed some interest to my neighbor. But I happened to go on the website for the Salem Main Street Association, where they have a drop-down menu titled Murals. And they appear to be taking a lot of credit for the 2 murals that SPAC facilitated for the city. And it made me think that we should get better credit for our work. Anyway, Hazel Patton, who many of you know, a longtime cultural advocate in Salem, is their interim executive director. And it might be worth just having a conversation with Hazel. She came to at least one of our meetings. She's a super involved woman downtown. But it also made me think, since my neighbor is a theater guy who would have limited knowledge of the visual arts, that maybe if there was better coordination about different efforts, around art and culture downtown, we'd get good results. And so it just made me think that we could promote ourselves as a resource within the city as people come up with these ideas, so that, like I said to my neighbor, Tom, when did you start looking for an artist? Like, this timeline's ridiculous. And he said, oh yeah, a few months ago. And it's kind of like, well, if I hadn't heard about it, must be pretty underground. Anyway. Anyway, I don't have any other great ideas to share this morning, but I hope can you imagine how cool it would be, though, if you had these really bold, fun graphics wrapping around that corner downtown? I think it would be great, but it would have to be really good. And speaking of which, I did drive by the Mel Katz sculpture again. There is what appears to be a name tag stuck to the sculpture on the lower third of it. It looks like, I'm never in the right lane, next to the sculpture, but it looks like someone took a name tag off and put it on the sculpture. At dog level, like if you had a medium-sized dog.
Like a sticky name tag?
What?
Like a sticky name tag that you would have on
that's
your...
what it looks like from across the street.
I should pop down and look at it. And I know I still haven't heard anything on the lighting, and that's been forever. So the lights were out. I'm sure they still are. So I
was there in daytime, so I don't know about the lighting. But Rick Yerk, who used to walk down to his office, which is down by the across from the new police station, he's the one who mentioned it to me. Mm-hmm. He said it looks like something's stuck on it, and then he actually asked, given the fact that the building that it's outside is now largely vacant, and now that JCPenney's is vacant, and that there's a vacant lot across the street, and Nordstrom's is vacant, he said, like, is this still the best site for a really nice piece of sculpture? Mm. I mean, he just mentioned it to me.
I would argue that it is not the best site no matter what's open down there.
Yeah,
I would love to see it somewhere else.
I would too. But here is one interesting piece of good news. So I tuned in to a Zoom meeting for SCAN, my neighborhood association, last week, and Eunice Kim, mainly to hear what was going on with the Our Salem project. And a lot of the conversation was around transportation issues. So, eventually I tuned out, and I was out for a walk in my neighborhood, and somebody was out raking leaves, somebody I didn't know. So of course I said hi. And then the woman said, "Wait, are you Chris?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And then she said, "I saw you on the Zoom meeting for SCAN." And then I said, "Oh, yeah, I was there." And then she said, she said, "I'm an active psych." I said, she said, "Do you call in often?" And I said, "Well, sometimes I do. I chair the Salem Public Art Commission." And she said, "Oh, my husband and I are active cyclists. We love the sculpture that's down, north of the Safe building." And I said, "Oh, that was a great collaboration. It was interesting. I love it too." And so, she said, "I hope we'll see more things like that." And it made me think that, even though you think all we're dealing with is finding money to repair things that are going to keep getting worn out, that people really do notice things. So it's kind of made my day. And I don't know what this gal does. Her name is Susan something, lives on rural. And yeah. Anyway.
I have something to add to that, if you don't mind.
Please.
Being a person who cycles, I live on Madrona Hill, and so I cycle down to Minto Brown and all through Minto Brown and into downtown. I haven't been there, but my son lived back in New York, and my wife went back to see him, and they went to a place known as Storm King. Have you guys ever heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah. Great big park that has really amazing sculptures just out in the landscape. And I keep riding through Minto Brown saying, boy, we could put something really cool over there. And, I know it's kind of arbitrary, but if we're looking for places to put things, it might be, get people to move through the park.
I totally agree.
Yeah, we've actually talked about that, Kelly.
Yeah.
We talked about Minto, we talked about Bush Park. So yeah, keep it in your head.
Yeah, I know at Storm King, they actually rent bikes, so you can cycle through the park to go see all the sculptures. So it's got, there's some business built around it too.
And the interesting thing about Storm King, because I recommended to my son that he go there because of all the social distancing rules, and Storm King is outdoors and it's so spread out. It is really hard. You can almost not even get a ticket to go in now. You have to plan out so far in advance because it's so in demand,
right?
For folks. And the sculptures are beautiful and with seasonal changes.
Yeah.
But here's one other thing that I'd like to get back on our agenda, and that is the conversation with the Parks Foundation and with Patricia at Parks about just what Kelly's talking about. Where is there opportunity? Can we look at some of the parks outside of downtown? Are there temporary installations? Because I do think, even going back to our Oregon Environmental Council partnership, that, there might be some cooperative efforts that we could consider for some seasonal pieces. I mean, maybe even timed with the opening of the Rotary Amphitheater, to get people moving around the parks that link to Riverfront Park. But I do think it'd be worth a conversation. Well, we're almost at 11:30. We've covered a lot of ground this morning. Anything else that we should take up before we wrap it up?
Well, just one thing for Heather, just to loop back with you on this one, Heather. Do you remember when I mentioned that the Elsinore had forwarded a grant possibility?
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe it would be appropriate for doing anything with the mural theatrical hardscape, but I did think it might be pretty good for the city.
For managing the collection, you're organizing, better organizing. Yeah.
That's right. And you have to pull in a conservator to help you.
Mhm.
And so we're talking about having to look at each of the artworks individually and work up a maintenance plan for them.
Mhm.
And that I read the grant. That seems to me to be pretty close to what they're looking for.
Do you remember the timeline submission?
I remember that December 2nd was going to be a Zoom meeting that they were going to answer questions. So it's coming up.
Okay, I'll look back. That was all in your email, which I
think
have.
so. Yeah. If not, just let me know and I'll find it again.
Okay, thank you.
I think the deadline is in January, but there's like an informational webinar that would be worth
Mhm.
tuning into.
Thank
I might be able to look at that.
And I think it was like $10,000 to $15,000 range. So it's not a huge pot, but it would be a nice way to get started on what we need to do here with the maintenance.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah,
for
and
bringing that up.
I mean, Oregon does not apply for enough money from the NEA. I encourage more applications to the National Endowment for the Arts from this state because we deserve to be getting more money, and people don't apply.
Mhm.
Just in my humble opinion.
Just a couple more quick updates in the minute that we have, just to let folks know. SHPO did approve. We submitted the application to have the council chamber doors removed and replaced, and they didn't have concern with that. They did express an interest in seeing those doors will be stored on site. I think somewhere on level 1 where the police are currently housed, and they're soon moving out, right? So I think it's going to be stored somewhere down there. They did express an interest in seeing how that might be finally displayed at some point. And I know so at some point we'll regroup and have that discussion again. They did express interest also in keeping the plaques with the door, but I think that's up to this group. I chatted with Kimberly a bit about that, and she said really it's going to be up to SPAC to make that determination. So there's that kind of sitting out there for future. And then just so folks know, we did move forward to council on the 9th of November with proposed revisions to code, to chapter 15 for that funding piece, to remove the allocations so that the public art fund just is one fund. We don't have requirements for maintenance, management, and acquisition. That went through first reading without a question. So it's scheduled to go back the 23rd, next Monday, for second reading. And I don't know, I don't anticipate any questions on this stage, but I'm going to attend again just in case. So hopefully that's coming soon.
Can I ask a question, but going back to the council doors?
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting if we could figure out how that artist was selected for that work, what led to that. I know I looked around, I poked around a little bit, but I didn't get too far. Anyway, it kind of got off my radar. But it would be interesting to know how that all came into being.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone remember the artist's name off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head, but if you Google him, I think he was former faculty at OSU.
Yeah, I think that's right.
He may have also been a Mormon who did church doors for other, he did doors for other buildings.
Is it Wayne Taysom?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And he moved out to the coast because I did track it that far.
Yep.
But I don't even know if he's still alive.
He's not.
Okay.
And James took some very nice photos, by the way, of the doors. So we have new updated photos recently.
Kelly?
Yes, they were great.
Kelly, you're muted. Great. Maybe you could share those images. I think that would be, I'd love to see them. I love the work. Okay, are we about ready to adjourn? All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Oh. Thanks, Chris.
Stay
Thank
safe.
you.
You
You
all.
too.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Paula, thank you for your email.
Oh, yeah. I'm happy to talk to you anytime to
Okay.
follow up with
I
that.
haven't really looked through the paperwork yet, but I'll get started on it and get it to my cousin and get him started on it too.
Cool.
So,
Let me know if I can help.